And again, our forever chairman, Elijah Cummings, reminded us that the charge of this committee is to be an efficient and effective pursuit of the truth. And so I'm encouraged that today we made some progress in that regard. And I want to thank you under oath for your honesty, Mr. Cuccinelli, and taking responsibility for that decision to reverse the policy. I want to ask you, it was previously mentioned on the record that your agency had done analysis to ascertain what would be the impact of such an abrupt policy change. Do you believe that your agency did enough analysis to assess that impact?
I'm sorry if I was unclear earlier. We didn't do any separate studies, for instance, like we might when preparing a regulation or something. It was internal discussion, not what I would characterize as a study.
Well, given that it was an abrupt policy that stood to impact quite literally the lives of critically ill children, in hindsight, do you think that you should have done some analysis?
Well, I do think in the if I had it to do over again category, that I would not have applied it to people then pending, if for no other reason than to ease the information out and to not surprise them with a change in circumstances. That'd be the main thing I would do differently.
All right, Mr. Cuccinelli, it has been widely reported that the Office of Legal Counsel at the DOJ determined that you were not eligible to serve as Acting Secretary of Homeland Security under Vacancies Reform Act and the Homeland Security Act. It has also been reported that the Director of the Presidential Personnel Office at the White House has accepted this decision and briefed the President accordingly. Do you accept the decision of the DOJ and the Presidential Personnel Office that you are ineligible to serve as Acting Secretary?
I'm not privy to anything you just described, and so I cannot answer that question.
Well, it's public record, but it's just, could you give me your visceral response?
As you may know, my last government post was Virginia state government, and I am no expert. I know areas of the law very well, but I don't know them all. And one I don't know very well is federal employment law, including things like the Vacancies Act and so forth. And I have not studied it or looked at it.
Sure, but again, the Department of Justice and the Presidential Personnel Office have ruled that you are ineligible to serve as Acting Secretary. So if asked to serve contrary to the law, will you decline?
I would not do anything contrary to the law. If I understood something to be contrary to the law, I wouldn't do it.
All right, very good. If President Trump chooses either of you to replace Acting Secretary McClellan, will you commit to keeping deferred action protections in place at USCIS? And this is for both Mr. Cuccinelli and Mr. Albence.
I don't think it's appropriate to comment forward like that. I told you just here what I would characterize as I'll call it a mistake, because it was, to apply this retroactively in particular. I do think the underlying philosophy was correct, and I also understand that deferred action remains available for all the people, even had the USCIS policy gone forward. But I cannot tell you going forward what I would advise some other secretary to do, or what they would do, or even if I were the secretary.
Well, that's disappointing.
Because this is, I understand,
Mr.
ma'am.
Cuccinelli, you've accepted, respectfully, you have accepted responsibility for making this egregious policy reversal. You have also expressed regret, and just now you used the word mistake. And so I'm not sure why it is challenging for you to just offer, if you are the acting secretary, would you keep the deferred action protections in place at USCIS?
I don't expect to see any change regardless of who the secretary is, unless the program itself changes
Reclaiming my time.
dramatically.
Mr. Albence, your response?
I mean, first, I don't think there's any reason to speculate that I might be the acting secretary, because I don't see that happening.
Well, Would you keep the policy in place, sir? Yes or no?
I would certainly look at any decision going forward. I support the decision that Acting Secretary McAleenan made.
Reclaiming my time, in closing, I just want to remind my colleagues here today to not lose sight of why we are here, the families and their critically ill children whose lives are on the line. We've talked a lot about process, but this isn't about process, it's about people, and we should never forget that. Thank you, and I yield.
The gentlelady yields back. Thank you for your comments.